Morning, everybody. We're going to get started in a little bit here. Morning, Sarah.
Morning, Alex.
So I'm going to bring you, Deputy Mayor Wasserman, and then everybody from Cranford on as panelists. And I'll sort of go off screen but be running the controls for those that once you get to a question and answer period, and happy to assist with that.
Okay, what do you think is the best way to do question and answer? Do you want them to do raise hands like our township committee meetings or what?
Yes,
Yep.
yes. Sorry, okay. I'm also bringing on Committeeman Sanjeev Vinayak as well.
Okay. So please, jump in if you're needed for something or clarification is needed or whatever.
Of course. I'm bringing on, and it is Dan Aschenbach, Jason. Morning.
And Al Spinelli is the third person from Cranford.
So I think it's just Al on here. Al, if you're on, can you just raise your hand? Just want to make sure I got the right one. Okay.
Nice to see you, Dan Aschenbach.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well, and yourself?
Oh, pretty good. Very good.
Unmuted.
Hey, Sanjeev. Hi, Sarah.
Good morning, Richard.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Okay, one more person. Let me try to get Al on here. Oh, I brought in Jim.
Alex, will this be on the township website under Flood Mitigation Committee? Since
yes.
We're recording it? Yes, okay.
Just give me one minute here. I got Jason now. I'm having a difficulty getting Al in as a panelist. There we go. Got everybody now.
Morning.
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 Good morning.
Morning.
So I think that Deputy Mayor Wasserman or Committeeman Benayak wanted to sort of kick things off, and then Sarah was going to moderate the information session here. So I'll turn it over to all of you.
Thank you, Alex. I just want to welcome everybody this morning on this workshop. I'm the co-chair of this committee, along with my colleague Sanjeev Benayak, and we're very pleased to host this. And with that, Sanjeev, would you like to say anything? And then we'll
Sure. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Sarah, for getting this coordinated and getting it done for us. It is very, very valuable, or going to be valuable, talking to the residents and talking to the people who have gone through this process. And it will be directly conversation with our resident to understand what all it entails and how can we get it done here. As you may know, we got flooded really badly, even along not just the basements, even the living space. And lifting of homes or elevation will be very, very helpful, at least in certain areas where the water went in the living space. So we want to know what should we do and how can we go about it, and get this process to at least all those homeowners who are interested in this, to get that done for them as well. Thank you so much for taking the time out for us today. So Sarah, to you.
Thank you. Our neighborhood group, which is the South Mountain Civic Association, offered to host an information session with Cranford residents who would share their experiences with home elevation. Deputy Mayor Wasserman and Committeeman Benayak suggested that we incorporate it into one of our township flood mitigation committee meetings. And that's why we are here today. So in order to plan for the discussion, I reached out to the Spinelli family, whom I know from my years teaching in Cranford. Their home was elevated after Hurricane Irene in 2011. Al Spinelli's responses to questions and Dan Spinelli's photographs of their house before, during, and after the construction were shared with interested residents of this neighborhood. I also asked my go-to person on Rahway River flooding, that's former Cranford Mayor Dan Aschenbach, founder of the Rahway River Mayor's Council, to join us, and to invite someone who was knowledgeable about the home elevation process. He suggested Jason Garis, who is a Cranford Township Committee member, liaison to their flood committee, and a member of the Home Elevation Steering Committee. Jason is also the owner of an elevated home, which, as I understand, he bought after it was elevated. And those are our guests today. So before we get to the residents' questions, I just want to clarify, I believe we are discussing the FEMA grant programs that are supported by the NJOEM, which assists communities in applying for and implementing the grants. There are 3 primary FEMA grant programs that support elevation. I believe Cranford uses the Flood Mitigation Assistance Program. Please correct me if I am wrong. All our interested residents were sent a link to the NJOEM Home Elevation Guide. And if anyone hasn't read it yet, spend some time looking at it, I would encourage you to familiarize yourself with it. So I'm going to begin with Al Spinelli. We sent him some questions about his experience. And the first follow-up question that we have for him is whether or not he had flood insurance at the time he applied for the program. And the second question, right, which I think is one everybody wants to know, what did it cost? Al? He is muted.
While Al is getting on the call or unmuting, just so you all know, there is Flood Mitigation Committee on the call, as well as the residents on the call.
Al, are you there? And can you unmute?
Okay, there we go. Can you hear me now? Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Sorry about that. Good morning, Sarah. Sorry about that, everybody. The first question I believe you had was that, did I have flood insurance at the time that we were proposed for this grant? Yes, we had flood insurance. And originally, and I don't know if everybody wanted to know, but originally we weren't part of that initial grant. And we couldn't understand that. So we had to go back to the township committee and lobby for ourselves to get in that first group. So they did add us on and we did get elevated, but we did have flood insurance. And one of the things that was told to us was that if we didn't now accept the FEMA grant, the flood insurance would go up 20 to 25% a year because of all the repetitive losses that we had. That was our third flood since we've been here. Third major flood, first floor flooding, basement and first floor. So we elevated, we joined the program for sure and elevated. So yes, we did have flood insurance at that time.
And Al, what did it cost you? And how much did you get from FEMA? I think everyone wants to know that. Yeah,
originally, the original estimate, and that was very early in the process, they estimated that it was a 75-25 split. FEMA 75, homeowner 25%. Originally, the number that they came up with was $35,000 for the homeowner. As everyone well knows, it's an old house, and things went on. The final cost for me was in the ballpark of $55,000 out of my pocket.
And
so overall, sorry.
Go ahead, Sanjeev.
Overall, it was about $200,000 cost. So if
about 220, about 220 was the overall cost. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I did. At the same time, I did incorporate as part of that a conversion from oil to gas. So that might have added a little bit, a new gas furnace. But other than that, it was just strictly the home elevation. There was no other add-ons by the homeowner, by me.
Thank you.
Al, can I ask a question? When was this done?
2014, they started and they completed in 2015.
2015. Should we assume that the prices would be high? I wonder if we assume that the prices would be higher now.
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Al, we had a question about whether or not you had to pay for your own rent when you were displaced. I know you lived nearby for a while the construction was going on.
Yes. What was done at the time was they allocated $3,000 for rent. Their original estimate was 3 months to raise the home, and they were allocating $3,000 to rent. I was very fortunate. I had friends that lived actually right across the street that weren't living in their home at the time. So they allowed me to move in there. So the rent didn't become, for me, in my situation, didn't become an issue. But the project did take almost 7 months before I was able to get back into my house. So there were a number of stoppages and problems along the way.
So is there $3,000 per month, or is that $3,000 overall?
$3,000 overall at the time. Oh. Yeah, it's very hard to find a place to live for $3,000 for 3 months, what they were saying, but that's.
Okay.
I have a question for Dan Aschenbach. Al referred to the fact that he didn't make the initial cut of homeowners who were accepted into the program. I think you were you mayor at the time or on the township committee? Do you know how many homeowners applied for the home elevation program after Irene and how many were approved?
I don't know, Jason, would you have an answer to that? I seem to remember the number of 18 that were approved, but.
I think we have 15 up total right now. And a few of them were private. I could tell you the numbers. I could tell you numbers post IDA of how many people have applied for either 21 or 22 grant. We sent out letters. We had, I believe we have 32 responses, and we have 31 additional families that want to apply to be put up now.
Can you tell me those numbers again, please? You had how many responses and how many additional?
We either had 32 or 33 responses, and out of the responses of people that were interested in doing some type of program, there were 31 that are interested in being raised now post. So, yeah.
Post IDA.
Yeah, post IDA, right.
Okay. Now, is there some kind of grant that is already given to the township?
No, so there's a couple things going on. We were working before IDA. We were working on to raise more homes. We had 6 homeowners who had initially applied, and that process had started before I was elected. One of the homeowners had dropped out, so right now we have 5 homes that are in the process of going up that we expect to go up, hopefully early 22. And then after IDA, we were having discussions with state OEM, and they encouraged us to again apply for the 2021 grant. We sent letters out to the interested or the affected homeowners based on information from FEMA, and we had the 31 responses post IDA. So we actually have 5 going up, and then we anticipate obviously putting in for grant money for 2021 as well as 2022. And just to kind of piggyback a little bit on what Al was saying earlier. So I actually ended up purchasing the house directly next door to Al. So Al and I are neighbors. At the time it was 75-25. The program has changed depending on whether a homeowner is repetitive loss or severe repetitive loss. If it's severe repetitive loss, it's 100% coverage. And if it's repetitive loss, it's 90% coverage now. So the program's actually gotten better from when the first set of homes went up here in Cranford. So the program has gotten better for homeowners.
I have a follow-up to that. Does that mean that the area in which the houses are located has to be designated a flood zone?
Well, we are all in the flood zone, but as far as like severe repetitive loss and repetitive loss, that is, I would refer to it as a tail that follows the property and not necessarily the homeowner. So if you had FEMA-backed flood insurance, they have a history of what was paid out on the property, and that would determine whether or not you're severe repetitive loss or repetitive loss.
Interesting. Dan Aschenbach, did you want to add anything to how this has evolved over time since Irene to IDA?
Well, after Irene, we had no participation in that program. It was something the town was thinking about, and it really was the sort of this type of effort of citizens putting it forward. And to put it in context, during Irene, and I don't know the data for IDA, but there were 460 homes that had first floor damages. So it was a very big problem. Obviously, one of the things that slowed participation down was not being familiar with what houses would look like and how it would fit in and the cost. But I think it certainly resulted in some very good examples of the town working with citizens to make something like this work for those who have had the repetitive loss that Jason has talked about. And I think that's the key. You have to have, I think it's at least two losses. And when you think about what may happen next with an extreme weather patterns and whatnot, I'm sure Milburn's familiar with this. It could, this will happen again. So getting started and getting it in place. And, I think there is a lot of experience now. And I know the state is very focused on this. I think it's something that they are very receptive to citizens, wanting to participate in this program, because they don't want to have the insurance companies, they don't want to have to put out this money each time. I think that's the whole concept here. So
I have two follow-up questions on this. One, Sarah, if that's okay.
Of course.
So one is how with this home elevation program, the homes that were elevated, what happened to them in Ida? And second is, when the home is elevated, is the basement completely filled up, or the basement is still there?
Well, Al and I could probably both answer.
Yeah.
So Ida hit Wednesday night. Thursday morning, we had, I think the high water mark in my basement was about 5.5 to 6 feet. Now, when I say basement, I mean the raised area, right? So the original basement for my home was filled in, and the raised area looks like a de facto basement now. But what you should understand is that the way the technology works is they call them flood vents. So I have either 8 or 9 flood vents that are placed around the base of my structure, which allows water to come in naturally, right? So when there's water on the ground, it's going to come into these homes, and that's to keep the pressure inside and outside steady, so we don't have any issues with a foundation wall kind of caving in. I'm sure a lot of people saw the video that kind of went viral after Ida, that was actually right around the corner from Al and I, of a house on Belmont where an entire wall kind of caved in when someone was walking through. So the flood vents prevent that. But what that also means is that when you're in a flooding situation, you will get water on that base level. And so when I say the high water mark within that first level, we measured it was somewhere between 5.5 and 6 feet, or in and around the home. And I mean, if Al can add to that too.
Yeah, Jason. Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, I had a basement, and when they elevated the house, they filled all the basement in and put us on a slab. Now I think FEMA calls it a walkout basement, I think is the term they use when they do these home elevations. So it's an area you can walk down there, and they measured in mine. I think it was like 58 inches of water down there was where the water line was when FEMA came. That's what they told me. And it's just as Jason said, there's flood vents. The water flows in and it flows out just the same way it flowed in when the water recedes. So I have to say, and Jason probably can attest to this, it actually, after being through 3 prior floods, it worked very well. We had minimal impact from Ida compared to the past.
So before, the water would be in your house, in the living space. Now in Ida, the water was on the road outside your house, but not in your living space.
Correct. Yeah.
You didn't have to leave home.
No, never had. First time I woke up to a real riverside view, because I was here. Every other time I evacuated. This time I didn't have to evacuate. The water came in and then it went down and went right out the next day. I had lofts built in that walkout basement down there that I measured to be 1 foot higher than the Irene flood line. And I stored all my things that I have on the floor down there normally up on these lofts before Ida, and nothing was touched. Everything was saved. And it worked. Once the water went down, you just have to power wash and remediate down there. And it was very much easier than it had been in the past. A lot less damage, and it worked out very well.
What I can say is that, so just to kind of give you guys an idea of the way we're situated. We live on Edgar Ave, which is, runs into Riverside. So obviously Riverside right next to the river. Al's the first house. I'm the second house. And the third house next to us is a similar house, but it was never raised. They were taken out by the fire department in the middle of Ida. The water was, almost 5 feet into their living area. And it was a husband and wife and 2 children. And they were taken out because they were on the second floor of their home and they thought it was going to get to the second floor. So yeah, 3 homes in exactly the same place. The 2 of us, I think the next morning, we're out on our, we might have said hello to each other on our front steps the next day going, well, this is going to be a rough day. But the difference in survivability of the structure compared to somebody who has not partaken in the program, especially in an area like ours, is just night and day.
So is it safe to say that we keep talking about long-term versus short-term, and this could be also a long-term solution to lift homes, but we work on dam to make it deeper, to hold water, make it to the side, check bridges, fix bridges. All those things can be kept. We can keep doing those things. But if homes are...
we should. I'm sorry, I was going to say we should. And, listen, Dan's been involved in this for many years,
right?
With what is going on either in Washington and or Trenton. And I'd like to think that we have had some movement. And sure, best case scenario, we fix the upstream issues that are causing these problems. But the raising of the homes is in addition to, right? So in a perfect world, sure, if the Army Corps came back in and came up with a fantastic solution and we never had to deal with this again, that would be a wonderful thing. But I don't think anybody can predict that with 100% certainty. You start to learn terms, which I wasn't really familiar with before I was on the township committee, a 25-year storm, a 50-year storm, a 100-year storm, predictive modeling versus damming. And so there's a lot that goes into it. But from where I sit, this is one of those steps that you can take on more or less an individual level to just protect your home, your family, and your belongings,
and
regardless of what happens with the government on the state and federal level.
And this is what I was getting to, Jason. So you have said it absolutely the right way. I think the bigger schema of things that is being proposed and that are being done, and there's so many other bodies involved, is one, and we have to continue to go that route. But this home raising is right at an individual level where even if while doing the other things, there's a storm that comes in, at least our people are saved if they have their home raised. And I think this is what we can push for quicker than the other whole Army Corps and state doing stuff or FEMA doing stuff. Does that summarize what you said as well? It's the same thing, right? We have to.
I agree with you. I mean, I think we have to continue our efforts. I mean, listen, we've had a lot of movement recently. The Army Corps, and Dan can speak to this probably even better than I can. The Army Corps is back in. They've been directed to come back in. The state DEP is signed on as a non-federal sponsor, right? And so we're going to start doing a look again at the upstream issues that cause this. But if you want to be pessimistic, the Corps was in before and ended up throwing their hands up. And so me as a homeowner in this area, I love this area. I would never leave this area. I see Al every morning. We often either go for runs at the same time or after each other. So, it's great. You live, next to the park. But I think, if you want to stay in an area like this, I would not have purchased a home if it wasn't raised, based on the fact that it wasn't in a flood zone. And I think it's, regardless of what happens with the government upstream from us, you've taken the most steps you can to protect yourself on an individual level. And of course, though, I agree. I think I'm optimistic. I hope that the Corps will come to a solution now with the state, and I hope we come to a resolution. I hope things are done. I hope my house is raised and it's never wet again. But it's just not something that I want to have to worry about if it does occur again before these solutions are worked out.
Very helpful. Thank you, Jason.
I actually have a couple questions. We're just in terms of the furnace and washer dryer and stuff. That's all taken from generally the basement level and put on the in the living space somewhere?
Yeah, it's all the mechanicals are raised. Like I said, we're going through it right now. We have an architect designing the 5 that are going up. Obviously, some of where items will go will depend. Will kind of depend on the layout of the house or what type of house you have. So in my house, the HVAC unit is hung off of the rafters in the basement. So it's probably, I want to say it's probably about 10 feet in the air. You need a ladder to get to it. And then the rest of our mechanicals, the air conditioner condenser is outside. It's raised up to the level of my first living space. The hot water heater is also up there, as well as the electric panel. So a lot depends on where they can put those items. But yeah, the idea is that you have all your mechanicals out of that first level, and they're all above the flood, whatever your base flood elevation would be.
And can I just to follow up that I'm jumping around a little bit, but what is the flood insurance? What is the new flood insurance premium like once once we go through this, and you have to have, and part of the deal is you have to have flood insurance, right? So, right. So yeah. What are we talking about? Is there a range of this is the new, this is what you're going to be paying?
Well, just for an example, my flood insurance went at the time, and back in 2014, I was paying $4,000 a year flood insurance. And as I mentioned, I think earlier, that it would have gone up if I didn't raise. They were threatening 20 to 25% per year. So I don't know what it would be now, but once I did elevate, it dropped to $400 a year.
Wow.
So that's a big savings for the homeowner. Now it's been 6 years, and I know I'm having that savings, so that pays back some of the out-of-pocket costs that I incurred back then.
Yeah, we have residents that pay, in the neighborhood of 10,000 or more if they're in the flood areas that aren't raised. And my premium now is comparable to Al. It's less than $500 a year.
I didn't realize that. I guess once you eliminate some of the risk, your premium would go down, right? I thought it would stay. I thought it was going to stay the same.
Well, the thing that we realized after Ida is, so it's federally backed flood insurance, right? So you end up having, the federal government paying out on these claims, right? Every when these claims happen. So like Al's been through 3 of them. This is my first one, but you go through, and now they say, all right, we're gonna give you this, this chunk of money to raise your house. But this chunk of money is kind of the money that we would have been paying you every,
right.
every so many years. So we're gonna use it to raise you, to take you out of that instead.
Right. So over several years, you actually are saving thousands of dollars.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Flood insurance, like as Jason said, I'm sure I still wouldn't be at $4,000. I would probably be in that category of $10,000, and now I'm paying $440 or something like that. So
good to know.
If you want to do the economics, honestly, it's probably even better now than when Al raised his house, and then when my prior owner raised the house that I purchased, because the program's actually gotten, there's more of a percentage of funding now, right? I think Al said he was 75-25. Now you're talking about either 90 or 100% of that grant money, your portion of it. So in theory, I mean, if you want to do the economics, you probably even, you probably could save even more based on the fact that you should have to pay less out of pocket now.
I have a question for Jason, and I've flooded 4 times here in Millburn, not in my living space, just in the basement. But I've been having a conversation with a member of our flood mitigation committee about retrofitting older homes, moving the mechanics up, somehow reconfiguring everything. Do you have anyone in Cranford doing anything like that? Are you familiar with anyone doing that? And my flood insurance premiums are not high. They're like Al's, I would say. But is this something that you see trending? Is anyone else looking at this?
Trending as far as raising homes?
Not raising, no, we're not elevating the home, but we're just moving everything out of the basement.
No, so the only experience I have with that really is knowing how ours was done and knowing that the architect is dealing with these 5. Outside of that, I don't have any knowledge of anybody in Cranford doing that on their own or retrofitting their home. Kind of like an in-between, like you mean like raising your mechanicals, but not raising your house. I don't
exactly.
And you know what? Actually, that might be a better question for Dan, because I know Dan's had a lot of contact with neighbors in this area as well. But me personally, I'm not aware of anybody who did anything like that.
Dan, do you?
I do know a few people who did it on their own, not through a program. There is the Army Corps actually has a program for retrofitting. The city of Rahway uses that program. I know my sister-in-law lived on Belmont, and they moved their washer and dryer and everything into the garage, which was at grade level. But Irene took that out. So they were floating in the garage rather than the basement. So it wasn't, it was a ranch house. So, that's an expensive proposition too. And I'm not familiar with the details of the federal program, but I know there is a retrofitting program. And again, I think I know that Rahway has done a lot of flood mitigation using that program. One of the projects that got approved by the Army Corps that was part of the overall Alternative 4A, it was called, which was using the dam for mitigation. This particular program did provide funds for not only retrofitting, but also lifting homes. It got what's called a BCR, benefit cost ratio, that had the highest of any of the projects. It got approved, but as part of the overall plan. So that particular alternative pretty much got held up now because of the Army Corps' inability to come to a final decision on the other alternatives. If you remember, they studied 19 different alternatives and came down to the one, and then the chief engineer in Washington determined he didn't want to use forecasts, and that's when the Army Corps left. Now they're coming back. So I would think that particular project could be I don't think there's a whole lot of work has to be done on it, frankly, as far as assessment. It may be something that could be put back. And I believe all the communities would be eligible for it. It wasn't just Rahway or Cranford. So, but that's something that would be, next year as that process gets started again. So, but again, I'm not familiar with any. I know the town Cranford hasn't done any retrofitting programs. Well, I should say we did do the municipal building, Brookside School, a few other municipal facilities, but that was not a homeowner project. So.
Okay, so Richard and Sanjeev, that's something for us to think about, because I'm sure I'm not the only person who's wondering about that and wondering if there's grant money for it. Among our other questions, and I did send the questions to Dan, Al, and Jason. I'll ask Al this: were you offered different methods to elevate the home, or how involved were you in that decision process?
I wasn't offered. No, there wasn't. Actually, the whole process was pretty much handled by a managing company, AMA, that they hired. So I really didn't have a lot of input. I mean, what they did was they came back with two contractors with different bids for me. One was from Louisiana, Dave Shoring. Another one was from New Jersey. I don't remember his name now. And each of them gave in a bid, and I had the choice to choose which one I wanted. Outside of that, Sarah, there wasn't much input from the homeowner. They definitely controlled the project and who was hired and how everything was being done. You know, so sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. There's pros and cons to both sides on that. You know, there were things that always didn't go as smoothly as I thought they could have gone if I had hired a private contractor, but at the same time, you know, they ran the project, and anything that questions you had or issues, you'd go through this company that AMA, he was a managing agent, and he would handle a lot of that for you, you know, between the town, the builder, and yourself. I didn't have a lot of input. They did have quite, you know, there was some questions that they asked along the way, if I wanted this, if I wanted that, you know, but there wasn't a lot. They had plans, an architect draw plans, and they suppose that was what they were supposed to do. Yeah.
So I would ask both Al and Jason, and this was one of our questions, and this is one of those blanket questions. What should people know if they're considering home elevation? What would you most want people to know, other than what we've covered so far?
Go ahead, Al.
Oh boy, that's a heavy question, Sarah, because there were so many things that happened along the way that I mean, the timing was so much longer than we anticipated. That was one thing, and I know it was some weather delays because they pushed into starting in the late fall for some reason or other. They were delayed starting, and then it happened to be a bad winter, and that held up a lot of things. I guess what I could have done better, or what I could have known better, would have maybe been checking out the plans a little more closely, because there were times where they didn't adhere to the plans and they were going forward with things that both Kathy and I weren't happy with. And one instance, I can give you one example, being, you know, a staircase inside that leads from the first floor living space to the walkout basement. You know, they had taken that away from us and told us that we didn't need that, and they would build us a nice pantry there off the kitchen. And we realized at that point that the only way to get in and out of the house then would be through the front or the back, both outdoor exits, so that when it snows or rains, you're going to have to shovel all those stairs to get out. And that's not something we wanted. So they had to go back and redo that. And it cost them time and money, I'm sure, but they had to add in the stairs that were on the plan. So there was some things, I guess, that, yeah, you would have to stay on top of. And not being your contractor, you're not as close to working with them, I guess. You know, it wasn't something that, so that would be something, I guess, that I can put forth. Yeah, that I could have been a little more involved in the plans and seeing what they were doing at the time as the work progressed.
I mean, I can echo what Al said, because I I mean, Al knew the previous owner, and from all accounts, they had basically checked out. They had moved while this process was going on. I don't believe they ever moved back into this home, and they definitely didn't keep their eye on the ball. And I'm not 100% sure, but I think we had the same contractor at the end that did the rate.
Yeah, our two homes had the same. Yeah. You're right. Yep.
So we had some similar issues that we had inspected before we purchased. But I mean, so I bought after. So I would say post. What you need to know is you're basically going to be living in a second story walk up, right? I believe there are some contingencies that an elevator can be put in, but elevators take up a lot of space. So you have to be okay with walking up the stairs to get into your home. And the other thing that is important to know is that once it's raised under the FEMA program, you are going to always carry flood insurance, and it's basically deed restricted where that bottom level, right? It can't be habitable space. You can't sheetrock it. You can't put down, you can't put down carpeting. You can't make it, another living room. It's got to basically stay as basement area. So that's just something to keep in mind too. That those are two things that we knew going into it, but I mean it's just two things you have to realize.
Can I just want to ask Dan a question. So for this program, did the municipality have to change zoning? Did you have to make allowances on what the town allows zoning wise?
I think there have been a number of zoning changes made. Jason, you might be more familiar with the most recent.
Yeah, so the first go around, my understanding is that there were no significant changes and that these homes had to go through zoning for variances for height and or setback, most notably for your steps in the front, because most of them don't meet your minimum setback. But what we did just do the last township committee meeting was we did pass an ordinance to basically take the homes that were being elevated out of our usual zoning requirements, so that these individuals that were going to be raised didn't have to deal with the expense and or the time of going through the zoning board process. So it actually turns the ordinance works so that your height that you're allowed to build starts at base flood elevation plus 4 feet is what we're using now. Wherever that number is, you're allowed to have your 2 stories and a attic above that, and that you also don't have to do a zoning issue if your steps aren't going to meet the minimum setback for your lot. So I mean, I'd like to say that as a township, we're kind of getting smarter the more that we go through this. But I think that those kind of minor change, and again, it only applies to people that are being raised, and it doesn't go for everybody, so people can't start building monster homes. But I do think those are kind of easy changes just to make the process go a little quicker when you get to the process of the architect coming in, everything being ready to go, that we're not being held up and waiting for zoning approval for something like this.
Right. So that's something that that's something that Milburn would have to do also, to make this.
Well, again, you don't have to, because Cranford didn't do it the first time and the homes managed to get up. It's just one of those things where it could make life a little bit easier inside the plan or the group of homes that are going up, and that's just one little hurdle that you don't have to deal with. So I think people that are going through this process, you heard how long it took for how long Al was out of his house. So something like that, where even if it saves you weeks or a few weeks where you're not waiting for a zoning approval, anything like that I think is helpful. So to me, I would recommend it. But, I wouldn't say it's a requirement, but, something you should think about.
Yeah, on Cranford's website, the section on flood control, I believe the ordinance is shown there, and a number of other documents related to the program.
Right.
And just to piggyback on what Jason said, I know, Sarah, the question was, what else can they look for? if there's ways of like expediting inspections while the house is being elevated, that helps as well. That cuts down on time, because sometimes I realized I was in a period where nothing was getting done because they were waiting on inspections and they couldn't move forward. So if there's a way of working with the town to expedite that, that would help also cut down on the time of the project, I believe. So that might help as well.
Okay, thank you. I think in the interest of time, it would be good now, Alex, if we could see if there are additional questions from residents and or members of the Flood Mitigation Committee for our guests.
Yeah, currently we have 3 people with their hands raised. And so just to let those individuals know, we will bring you on to ask your question. You will not have video capability, but just, you know, similar to our township committee meetings, you'll come on and you'll be able to ask your question to the group. So first we have Niraj. So I'm bringing Niraj on to ask his question. Go ahead.
Thanks, Alex. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yep.
Thanks. So I think my question was when Al was telling about the cost, and, you know, at the time it was 75-25, but approximate cost, I think he mentioned, was 220K. Is that dependent on the size of the house? And if so, could he share some information on what size of his house was? So we know that this size, you know, 220K, maybe ours is smaller, maybe ours is bigger. And thus we can kind of have an idea on what the cost would be. And the second question is, once the house is elevated, I think Jason was mentioning something about, you know, that you can't do this, you can't do that in that area. So how are typically, once the house is raised, whatever that area is under your house, how is that typically getting used or not getting used at all? Those are the 2 questions I have.
Okay, I guess I'll take the first question. Yes, I do believe, I mean, I'm not, you know, an expert in what the prices were, but I do know there were different bids based on your home. I think split level, I live in a colonial, a two-story colonial, but I believe like split levels present different problems for elevation as opposed to colonial. So I would think maybe the cost would be higher for those. What else? Did you have something else that you asked about? I seem to.
Got it. So it's the type of the house and probably the size, right? Because the base of the house also will decide how much of the house needs to be elevated. So for example, our house is a split level, and I'm now hearing that obviously the cost for our house would be higher as compared to other, or not, right? So
I believe the answer could also be given by the mayor and the councilman who are doing it for the recent house as well. It's 90-10 and for 100%. So I think maybe if you have any input, then Al has gone through this in the past. If Al, you know anything recent, that'll be fine too. I just feel that maybe other guests on the group may be able to better answer this question.
Go ahead, Dan.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I wouldn't have good numbers on that to provide you with. I don't know, Jason, if you.
I mean, I could tell you. So the ones that we're doing now, we have a per home budget that's established, and my understanding is it's the same budget for each home, and it's just whether it's 100 or 90-10.
Sorry.
So I mean, I think unless you're, I mean, all our homes are, I mean, within a couple 100 square feet, in more or less. So none of the 5 that are going up are mansions. So I don't believe any of them are like, that bigger in scope for the project.
And then that's what I thought, because Al went through, he was probably the first round of people who went through this. And at that time, there are a lot of kinks that get ironed out. Now, with a few years later, a lot of experience behind.
Yes, I agree.
And right. And also 90-10 versus 75-25, or even 100% for that matter. So I don't think that should be a big concern. Again, there's always a concern about when the cost comes in play.
Is there any? I'm sorry to interrupt. Is there any savings? Like if you do, is there one contractor that's going to come in under this program? Like if you do 5 homes, is there one contractor that's doing the work, or it's different contractors?
When we did it back in 2014, I believe they had 4 different contractors give bids on the 15 homes. We had each home had 2. I don't know if they selected the best 2 bids for each home. So you had a choice of 2 contractors, but there were, I found out that there were 4 different contractors that worked on different homes around here. So I'm not sure where they got the contractors from or how they determined these were the 4, but there were different contractors doing different, like Jason mentioned, we had the same contractor. We were right next door from each other. Our homes are very similar. So we had the same contractor, but if you went right down the street, they had a different contractor do their home while we were doing ours. So
we're
the same process?
The five now are we're going out to bid on them now. So I don't know. As I sit here now, I can't tell you.
So is the township going to go through the bid, or is that something state OEM does it?
Nope, through town.
Okay. So how does the process work?
What do you mean?
Township takes the initiative, or OEM and state takes the initiative?
No, in our town, we have a elevation kind of working group, for lack of a better term, township administrator. We have our grant consultant, our construction consultant, our zoning officer, myself, another commissioner, Tom Hannon, who is also very versed in the flood world. And we kind of have a working group that meets every once or two weeks. But we had a grant consultant that is putting the grant in for the town.
Can we do something in our town the same way, Mr. McDonald? Can we look into putting something together like this as well, or is that not our process yet?
To go through this program, I think you have to follow the same steps that you're hearing from Cranford. But I think that part of what our discussion is certainly, whether first to bring on a grant consultant, also make sure, discuss eligibility and probably get some additional information from the residents about their current status of flood insurance, as I think that plays heavily into the decision from NJOAM to come onto a program like this.
So as far as the eligibility goes, the biggest prerequisite that we didn't have here was homeowners having the flood insurance, which if they have it, the biggest part of the requirement gets taken care of. And then we can look into any other prerequisites or requirement for this program and can share that with the residents. Is there anything else on the eligibility side that we can be informed about?
Yeah.
I just wanted to chime in. The flood insurance must be held by the homeowner at the time of application. So there's not like a look back or something like that. According to what I've read, homeowners don't apply directly. What's called a sub-applicant applies on behalf, and the community, the township, I believe, is the sub-applicant. And then there's also the issue of whether or not the home is structurally sound, that someone has to make the determination that this is a home that can be elevated. So there are a few steps before. Alex, did you want to add anything to what I know, which is just from reading the handbook?
Yeah, no, I think that's there's a lot of steps in this, and I think that it's important that what Committeeman Benayak said is, sort of getting that first step off the ground, but also having somebody that can come in and walk you through this program, because it is complicated. I mean, that guide alone is 94 pages long. So, but I did want to point back to the other question that was raised by Niraj, which was, in that deed restricted portion, what is, allowable, what do you in your experience have in that area? I see that, it's probably your garage and some other things, but I just wanted to make sure that second question got answered. And we have one other person then also looking to ask a question from the audience.
In my walkout basement, I really don't. It's I think I mentioned earlier, I've built lofts 6 feet off the ground around the perimeter, so I have that for storage, and I also put up big hooks up high just below the ceiling, the drop ceiling there, that I can hang my bikes from in the event of a flood or an impending storm or something like that. I go down and I hang my bikes off the ceiling like that. Other than that, I guess I have, a lawnmower and some storage down there, but really nothing else. It's just literally what almost they call it a walkout basement. There's plenty of space. There's a high ceiling, but it's just a place that you can temporarily store stuff, I guess, down there. I don't know if Jason utilizes it differently, but that's my being through 4 floods. I try to keep it as clean down there and everything off the ground that I possibly can, for the most part, and make easy access with the storage with the lofts that I built, so I can get things in and out off the loft, and I don't have to worry about it if I'm not home and a storm comes.
I'm basically the same. We have a garage, and then we had our son's 10 years old, so we had a lot of like toys and stuff like that down there. Our bikes are down there. I had a few workbenches in the back, just for home projects and for waxing skis and snowboards. But that was it, just really storage, nothing beyond. I mean, the good way to put it is nothing beyond like stuff that you wouldn't probably normally have in your basement.
Yeah.
Jason, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Do you know offhand how many people in your town had the flood insurance? Because you guys qualified. In other words, you guys qualified for the program. Do you have what's the number? Like, do you know that?
I don't know that number off the top of my head. I know the number is definitely out there, especially if it's federally backed flood insurance. They have that exact number. I don't have that number at my fingertips. No, I'm sorry.
I'm just trying to gauge how many people. I'm just trying to gauge from Millburn. How many people would have to sign up to make us to put us in the range. If you want to send me an email or I can definitely follow up and get you probably better numbers on that for sure. I guess I didn't come completely prepared for.
No. I think, Jason, I think if there are 20 applicants for this to raise homes, and if all 20 have insurances, that should work.
So that's the minimum kind of number, you think?
I don't think there's a minimum. I mean, we're doing 5 right now.
Yeah.
So it's not a. I don't believe, I don't know if there's a minimum because I can't speak to the federal program, but I wouldn't say the number has to be that big. I mean, we're the first round was 15. This round's 5. So, I think it can kind of be all over the place. Again, though, I mean, if you want, I can certainly follow up with you with more specifics from our grant program people.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I think, Irene was 450 or so homes that had first floor damage. So you would think that people had flood insurance because of the next storm doing the same. But I know for a fact that a lot of people just didn't want to take that expense, so they didn't go ahead with it. So the people who have signed up for this program are those that are interested and committed to having their houses lifted. A lot of people don't want to go through that trouble. So it really is, I think, commendable on the town of Cranford's part, the township committee today, getting out there and ensuring that people have that opportunity, because the damages are more likely to happen again, and those people at least are protected, which is something that, again, as I pointed out, the state, I know, has encouraged this type of project, because they don't have to come in then and build bigger projects, I guess, flood mitigation projects.
Right. So I just want to thank everybody. I actually have to go into the next meeting. So I just want to thank everybody. And Sarah, thank you so much for organizing much of this and moderating. And Dan and all of our guests, Jason and Al, thank you so much. And of course, my colleague, Sanjeev, thanks so much for making this happen today for our residents. And I really appreciate it. And have a wonderful day.
So we have two other hands raised. We'll bring them on now. Kim?
Hi, how are you? Thanks, first of all, for organizing this and doing this for us. But my question actually has to do with what you guys were kind of just talking about, the flood insurance. So it sounds like the first thing that a lot of us should do is buy the flood insurance in order to be eligible for the house elevation. But that being said, since we didn't have the flood insurance when Ida hit, is that, because it sounds like we also have to have some sort of repetitive loss, right? Is that loss from Ida going to be, I guess, counted towards making us eligible for the house lifting?
That's a good question. That is not anything that's in my wheelhouse for sure. I mean, that would definitely go to, I would say, somebody more familiar with the program at the state level. But I believe there does have to be some type of repetitive loss before you get rolling with this.
So I can only, sorry to jump in, but I can only speak to, I could speak to this peripherally, that when I had a conversation with NJ OEM, their concern in sort of the nationally competitive round of these types of grants was that if you didn't have that look back or that ability to, that you had federally backed flood insurance and had repetitive loss that they could point to against that insurance coverage, that it would be less likely to be a attractive project to do from their standpoint. However, it's my understanding that when we were declared a disaster area and that when additional FEMA funds roll into their coffers, that it becomes more of a localized sort of effort than a nationally competitive grant program. So that's something that is a really good question, Kim, and something that I think needs to be looked into further in terms of getting that insurance. And it may not apply to something like Cranford's been able to do in an ongoing way, but can we do it as a result of Ida and the storm that took place and the money that they're going to receive from FEMA for that?
Okay. So yeah, I guess that, kind of addresses my next question is like, I think it's great that you guys are having us speak to Cranford, who has been doing this. And, I think myself and a lot of my neighbors, we're all for raising our house. Let's do it, but we can't afford it, right, on our own. So what is, I was hoping Richard would still be here, but, but I guess between Richard and Sanjeev, what is the outlook of us actually getting a grant like this? Like, are we getting our hopes up for nothing, or?
So Kim, first of all, I don't think anyone can raise their hopes up, or everyone should be optimistic and try it. Your guess is as good as my guess as well. It's not that I knew about this home elevation before we looked at the homes. I actually got to know about this when Alex was talking to the NG OEM and started pushing for it to get somewhere. At least we are here, we are talking about it. Again, you should not be under the impression that it is an easy go, but based on repetitive nature of what happened, say you bought your home recently, and if earlier the same home got hit, I assume, I hope they take that into consideration, that it is an incident that repeats itself. So again, to me, seems a little different. I am very hopeful, but my guess is as good as your guess.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I don't know that when they got hit previously, if the previous homeowners had flood insurance. I mean, a lot of us over in that area, we're not in a flood zone, so most of us don't have the flood insurance. Yeah, so I mean, I would hope that you guys would probably have a little more information than I do, but I guess maybe that's not the case at this point.
So Kim, another thing is, most of the houses there have accepted FEMA grants. And whoever has accepted FEMA grant, if I understand it correctly, you have to have flood insurance going forward.
Yeah.
No, I don't believe that's the case. You have to be if you accept the FEMA grant and you take the money, if you're in a flood zone, you have to have the flood insurance. If you're not in the flood zone, you don't have to purchase it if you don't want to.
So I just want to clarify a little bit on that, is that there's different types of flood zones, right? There's a floodway, there's an AE zone, there's an X zone, and they classify these by the preponderance of flooding during certain types of storms that would take place. And so, we have very few homes that are actually located in a floodway or an AE zone, which is the blue on the FEMA flood maps. And much of our homes in the South Mountain area or in other areas of town that are prone to flooding are in an X zone or the 500-year flood zone. And so under the insurance requirements, and I'm not sure, I know that if you touch a floodway or if you're in a floodway, you are required by your mortgage company or to purchase flood insurance. But I don't know that that is the case for even an AE zone or an X zone. So much like Dan and Jason and Al are talking about in Cranford, much of the zone that they live in and they're talking about is an AE zone. And it doesn't sound to me like flood insurance was required even there when it came to mortgages. So, and then take that down another level, and much of our areas are located in an X zone or a 500-year flood zone.
So is it possible to have similar kind of conversation with the OEM guys? Maybe not, but when we heard about us not being qualified, it was because we did not have flood insurance. And the first step would be to have the flood insurance, to at least go and reach out to these offices where they can at least listen or take a review to our application. So if we think that first we need to know the application won't even be reviewed, and we were actually kind of said, you're not qualified. So if there is no flood insurance, I don't know how we can get ourselves qualified, but at least with the flood insurance, or maybe, Alex, if we can find out if NJOEM can do the similar call with us, it'll be at least more informative on the process side.
I have a question. So Kim, have you bought flood insurance since Ida?
We haven't. I mean, our house is all torn up. There's nothing to protect right now. We will buy it once we do the rebuild. But I mean, right now, if another flood came today, honestly, we would just stick some fans in there and that would be it. I mean, we haven't rebuilt anything yet.
And your neighbors, have they purchased flood insurance? Do you know?
I don't know.
Don't know.
So I think this is something that we as a township should just we should work to find out and sort of reach out to the community to find out where everybody sits, additional information on flood insurance, whether they have flood insurance or not, or whether they've purchased it since Ida. We can sort of get that information gathering.
I mean,
going.
I'm sorry, Alex, to cut you off.
No.
I mean, I think my concern is, I mean, we do plan to buy the flood insurance, and that is not the issue. I mean, my concern is whether or not we're going to be qualified for the grant or not, which is the question about the repetitive loss.
For the grant and that 94 pages that Sarah talked about, the first thing in that is having a flood insurance.
Insurance.
So I guess and insurance, same thing. But once we get those applications from the interested residents and they have that checkbox where the insurance is there, I think it makes a stronger case for us to go to NJOEM and say, we are interested, whether that's 10 applicants or 15 or 5, we're going to go to them and make our case. Whether they deny or accept, I think if everyone has that box checked off, hopefully we get approved.
Yeah, I would support that. And it may be that, you know, Kim doesn't buy it right now, but 5 neighbors buy it.
Right. And those 5 neighbors' application goes through.
Yes.
And let's see how that goes.
In addition to flood insurance, and I think Jason or Dan probably can speak more to this, but when I went through it, you know, I had flood insurance back in 2014, but what they told me to become eligible for the grant program was, and Jason, I know, has touched on this for the new rounds, is repetitive loss. The amount of the homes that were included in the grant they looked at repetitive loss and how much cost that incurred, in addition to proximity to the river. That's what I was told to me when I applied back in 2014. I don't know if things have changed but it wasn't just merely having flood insurance. They looked at how much loss you had from prior floods to.
So again, and just kind of putting back to my initial conversation with NJOEM, which was, you know, that certainly those who had flood insurance and have had repetitive loss are, you know, on their radar and something that they want to solve for because they don't want to pay out as much. But let's say all of our residents go and get federally backed flood insurance, and they're looking to prevent these losses that are going to be paid out by the federal government. I assume that their mindset there, and this is kind of what I was hearing from NJOEM, was that, well, yeah, why wouldn't we also, you know, go down this road, because now we're preventing future claims, and we have the ability to prevent future claims, knowing that property, you know, and you can look back and you can have history on certain properties. I think it was just that when you're competing nationally for a grant program, you're going to have less success if you don't have those repetitive losses to that actual policy. But if you're competing locally, you'll have much more success when you're saying, hey, we've got flood insurance now, we want to prevent future losses, and New Jersey, you have this money in your coffer. Can we then now be a part of this home elevation program? Because post Sandy and post Ida are going to be very similar sort of situations where a bunch of money is being funneled into the state as a result of the disaster, and then you're competing more locally than you are, say, with people that live along the Mississippi River or the Missouri River or whatever. So I think that's where the rationale behind having people purchase flood insurance now, not only to protect themselves generally for future storms, but also to be eligible for a more localized program through New Jersey OEM.
You know, the thing is, Alex has spoken to OEM and he has provided all the information that he got from OEM. Sarah has been working on this for more than probably 2 decades or close to 2 decades, or at least over a decade. Our mayor and councilman from Cranford has been on this, and mayor has been on the Ravi River. He is, and she has provided all the information. Based on that information, I think what we are trying to say is, and Kim, maybe you're thinking it this way, that we should have more information. We can have more information, and we are providing as much as possible and be seamless and transparent. But that said, we are not the one who's going to approve this application. It's not within our jurisdiction. So that's where I say, with all the information that you can think of, that you can do, is the same information that we are dealing with and we can think of. It's not that we are in that office approving those applications. So we are at their mercy and at their call whether we'll get approved or not. Does that make sense to you, Kim?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I guess, just in terms of, like Sanjeev, you're saying, the first checkbox is to have the flood insurance, which I'm sure we're all going to get. But if the second checkbox is having that repetitive loss with flood insurance, we don't have. So we can kind of know, okay, this is unlikely to happen. I mean, I guess we're just trying to plan, like
and
for myself,
Kim, yes.
I'm trying to plan for the future and what are we going to do in the long run, right? This is not just the next year or two. It's these houses are our lives.
No, Kim, you're right. And look, this is a catch-22 situation. And I know we are all at an awkward situation right now because we haven't looked into flood insurance in the past. There are people who have had flood insurance, like Sarah has it for a very long time. And I don't know about the previous homeowner had it or not, but at least this is where we can start. Again, without giving any false hopes and not giving up on it. We want to keep pursuing it and get this grant. I want to get this grant, but we have to check all those boxes and go and see where we can go from there.
Sure. Yeah, I'm just saying that if we know what those boxes are, I think it would be helpful.
Yeah, Kim, I just to chime in, and then I want to make sure we get to the other two, but I think it's a really good question, and I will go back to NJOEM and sort of speak to them about in the example of people getting flood insurance, how are they determining repetitive loss or severe repetitive loss? Is it just a history of the property, even if it wasn't a policy claim? Or, is it something that they're only counting towards that policy now that it's been purchased? So very good question. And I'll make sure that's brought up with them as well. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
Alex, who are you dealing with at OEM? We had a guy last week that was awesome. Very, very informative.
I've been dealing with Caitlin Wolf, and I've also been dealing with Chris Testa.
Yeah. So Chris did a meeting with our elevation committee last week. I thought he was very good.
He's very informative, yes. And I initially out of the gates asked Chris to be if he would be willing to do a session. And I think that I think he's obviously he's trying to spend his resources where you guys are already involved in the program. And so right now he has just provided some information to me, but we'll continue to push Chris as well. But yeah, he's definitely very knowledgeable and very involved in the program.
Maybe we can ask Chris if we could.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, Alex, I agree with what you were saying about, I mean, his kind of one of the takeaways that we had from him was that to your point, that there is going to be, a lot of money that's going to be given to the state for him to for OEM to kind of, lack of a better term, dole out. So yeah, I do believe there's going to be a lot available in New Jersey.
And like he had a call with Cranford team, now we have a flood mitigation team. Maybe we can request him to talk to us.
I'll make the request again. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. We have two more people. And I think at that point, I think we're going to be running on an hour and a half here. Might make sense to, people can always provide their questions in another way, and appreciate the relationship with Cranford here. So let me bring on Michael Jurist. Michael?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Alex. Just very briefly, my question is more of an aesthetic impact of this raised structure in your neighborhood. My folks survived Hurricane Sandy. They live on the water in Freeport, Long Island, New York, the house I grew up in. They had 4.5 foot of storm surge go through their house for the first time ever, and they'd been there for 50-something years. The New York Rising, in order to take advantage of the FEMA money, required those folks that did that to raise their structures up above the floodplain. I don't know how many feet, but whatever. My point is that it totally changed the dynamics of the neighborhood. You have one house that's like way up in the, way up over ground, then you have a house that's not, and another one that's up. It totally changed the characteristics of the neighborhood to a point where it just doesn't look good. I mean, I'll be honest. So I'm just curious, what impact this has had in Cranford, and whether or not that's an issue there. I'll leave it at that.
You know, Michael, I felt the same way initially when the houses were being raised, but they do some, you know, you can get some nice landscaping, and they actually, the contractors, when they elevated the home, asked you for what kind of shrubbery you wanted around and how you wanted your house landscaped. With some nice landscaping and I don't know, maybe I've gotten used to it, or and I know I sent some photo to my son Dan, sent some photos to Sarah about how our house looks today, and I don't know, I've gotten used to it and it looks fine to me. Maybe Jason feels different. He came in after the fact, so I don't know how he feels, but initially I definitely agree with you. I was very concerned about the aesthetics and how everything was going to look in the neighborhood, but everyone that has raised their home here, it's very well landscaped around. There's trees, there's shrubs, there's bushes. It looks pretty good to me. I mean, that's just my own personal feeling. I don't know if Jason, if you want to, how you feel.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously we purchased it after it was raised, so if it was that terrible, we probably wouldn't have thought twice about it. Right. But Al and I both have these crazy rose bushes in front that never stop growing. Never. I think they're as high as the as we're there in front of the raised part now. I mean, you know, we're in Cranford, right? We're at a situation where we have, I think we have 15. We're going to have another 5, hopefully in 22. And then we have, like I said to you earlier, we have 31 people that want to go up, right? So at the point where you're going to have at least 20, hopefully 30 or 40 homes that are raised. I think the neighborhoods are going to look pretty, you know, everyone's going to look kind of similar at some point, where a lot of them in these areas are raised. You know, aesthetically, I don't know. I mean, honestly, the thing that was most inspiring to me was that that the majority of residents that responded to our letter said it wasn't that they wanted to leave Cranford, is that they wanted to be raised and stay. So, I mean, as far as the community is concerned, quite frankly, I was, you know, to me that was the best news, right? And if we have residents that want to stay, and the answer to them wanting to stay is to, you know, take advantage of this program and to be raised, I think that says the most about the neighborhood and about the town. And, you know, like I said, honestly, the biggest thing that my wife and I had to discuss was just, you know, you're going to have to be basically in a 2nd story walk up, right? That's it. Other than that, I mean, I actually kind of like the way it's raised. You know, you have Al and I have similar decks off the back. You have a great view in the backyard. But, you know, like I said, I guess I would agree with Al. There's so many that are up in our neighborhood already that I don't really think it doesn't really change much as far as I'm concerned.
Hey, Jason, do you mind if I just show a quick?
No, go ahead.
So I had it up on.
Thank you, Alex. That's a great thinking.
I've been to the Spinelli's house, and I have to say it has a certain charm. And I like the deck, the way it's situated off the back, and then of course the river is across the street on the other side. And I think a lot of us don't live in neighborhoods where there's a sameness of style. I think there's a colonial next to a ranch, next to a Tudor, whatever. But I think there's a lot of charm to the elevated houses.
Yeah.
So that's actually Al and Al's on the corner here in the gray one, and then my house is one in on the white one. So those are our 2. And then if you look to the far right of this screen that's up, you can see a road all the way to the far right, and the river would be inside of that. Yeah. So on the far side of those trees.
Okay. Yeah, I'm familiar. I take runs back there sometimes. So.
I can give you. Al and I can both give you all the distances wherever you want.
Okay, great. All right. One more person. One more question. I appreciate everybody's time. Rachel.
Hi, Alex. Thanks so much for screen sharing, because that definitely is helpful. Some of my questions are regarding how can we find out about how many hits to homes? So I was told in order to get flood insurance, if you accept the FEMA grant, that within I think like 30 or 60 days that you must obtain flood insurance. And I think a couple of other people in our neighborhood also were told the same. So if you could verify that when you speak with administrators, that would be super helpful. And then another question that I had was, what was exactly the final Army Corps of Engineers decision? Because the ones that I've seen that are in like slides, you know, from the Army Corps of Engineers or from different engineers, you know, cost hundreds of millions of dollars. So I was just curious as far as like which of the, you know, 19 or whatever many, because I think it was mentioned earlier in the call.
That's definitely a Dan question.
That's a Dan question, yes.
Well, there is no plan at this point, in that the Army Corps and the state DEP and the communities will be meeting. I imagine it will be in early January to start that process again. The 19 alternatives had a whole range of costs. The most expensive one was a dredging of the Orange Reservoir, which would be 15 feet of silt. The reservoir the bottom is about 30 feet. There's 15 feet of silt. And that would be taking all that silt off site, and half of that cost it was 213 million. Half of that cost was called contingency. So the actual work on the project would be about 100 million. And then a major portion of that cost was taking that silt off site rather than reusing it somewhere on site. So that was because of they do these alternatives, they do a cost benefit analysis, and that was the worst cost benefit analysis, but they never went back and looked at maybe there are other ways you can do the desilting. Rather than doing 15 feet, maybe it's 5 feet and some other modification. The one alternative that the mayors of the communities supported was putting in a bypass system, which would be a facility. It would look like a fishing pier that would be opened up 3 days prior to a storm. So all that water in the Orange Reservoir would go down through the system past Rahway during that time when the peak of the storm would start. And the concept there is you're lowering the elevation downstream. Millburn would be immediately benefited because the water elevation in Millburn would be that much lower because all that water is out of town. And that project would be about $9 million if they don't have to do any modifications to the dam. If there was modifications, the original plan was to actually reconstruct the dam, and that reconstruction was 45 million. And the other parts of the overall Army Corps project was downstream improvements. One in particular would be channelization through Cranford, and then another would be Rahway improvements. But none of the projects were in the hundreds of millions of dollars, other than that dredging project, and that was because of again if you took it down to the full bottom, the 15 feet, you know, that would be it's the taking it off site and having it tested is a very big expense. But ideally, you're talking long-term improvement. And that's the whole point here is, you know, this is why it's taking long. The Army Corps, while they are slow, but they want to make sure they're not causing further problems with whatever they do, and that it has a cost benefit. So where we're positioned today, the congressmen and senators wrote legislation that got passed that made the Rahway River evaluation a priority. And that was inserted in what's called the Federal Water Resources Development Act that was passed late last year. And that sets the position now that forces the Army Corps to come back and take a look at what could be done next. And that, again, those discussions would start in January. There's an alternative potentially that the state could do a project, or locally this bypass could be done. There are some complications with that, in that anything that's done locally obviously then would not get federal support. And the Army Corps projects are 65% federally funded, 25% state funded, and 10% local. And in this case, I think the view would be that either both Essex and Union counties would be participating. So locally, it would be not, wouldn't be a property tax cost. And that's why Cranford actually got involved in this initially. We did our own local program, that one of the pieces was a pump station that cost, I think it was $9 million, and we didn't get any federal or state support for it. And to do a bigger project, you needed upstream storage, which is kind of the only way you can do that is working with the communities and getting federal and state support because of this high cost of these projects. But those long-term structural things are really important. But I think it was earlier stated, the homeowner projects, those that were impacted substantially, doing these home lifting programs or other types of local infrastructure, while they'll be dramatic for the homeowner, and they do reduce that repetitive loss, but you need to have the combination of both, a longer term strategy and what I know Milburn's working on right now. The biggest, obviously, anxiety is that next storm is around the corner. If you believe it, climate change is such that we'll have extreme weather, communities do have to prepare. And what I would urge, there be a urgency to this now, because the state in particular is focused on what happened with Ida, and there is a lot of interest in getting something done of a big nature. The only thing that why there needs to be local focus is that, I think it was mentioned before, there is a competitive aspect of this. As you know, a lot of communities in New Jersey were hard hit, and they're out there looking for ways to get infrastructure in place. We do have a leg up in that we do have not only a federal authorization to proceed in the study, but we have the state as the sponsor as well, and that's all done already. That's ready in place. So now it's just getting a solution, a project that everybody can live with, that there's consensus. So I hope. Yeah. I probably went on too long, but
no, thank you. No, that's very helpful. So the slides that I had seen, the channel work was like over 230 million. The channel work in South Mountain was 174. The channel work in South Mountain Regional Detention was 164. And then the non-structural 100-year floodplain that was in Cranford was 188 million.
I've never seen that information.
Yeah, I can share it with you. I mean, again, it was on one of the engineers that did a presentation, and also Army Corps of Engineers, and it was found on like one of our town's township website. So it was available to everyone. And I guess my other question is just, historically, how can we find out what was done, after Floyd, after Irene, on a town basis, but then also like what money was given from the state and what money was given federally? Because I think a lot of us that have discussed this in our neighborhood is, and again, we bought our house actually from my husband's uncle who had lived there for 47 years. And so he, like many other of our neighbors, were told that after Irene, that so many mitigation things were in place and were done, and that shouldn't happen again. So I would be very curious about finding out the historical data of that, just because, again, I think a lot of us are making decisions. Yes, it's, raising our homes if you want to stay in the area, which a lot of us do, but it's a lot of individual responsibility financially and other, so I think a lot of us also want to know what was done historically. And obviously a lot of people are advocating for future changes and future mitigation efforts. The other thing that I just want to speak to is that you had said, like, the congressman had they had signed the Rahway River Federal Waters Development Act. How is the most recent thing that they signed either in December or January different than years? Because my understanding in reading that document was that it has to be proposed either every 2 years or 3 years. I may be mistaken, but I'm just curious if it is something that is kind of reintroduced every couple of years. How is this different?
2 years.
Yeah, it's every 2 years. We've been in the prior two iterations of the Water Resources Development Act with a ongoing Army Corps interest in this evaluation. They determined in 2019 that unless the communities accepted a larger dam at Orange Reservoir or a dredging project of that magnitude, or another dam of what was called the South Mountain Dam, that they could come up with any solution that would be worthy of their time, I guess. So they basically walked away. And what's really fascinating was you go to their website and they took all the documents you're asking for off the website as if we didn't exist anymore and there's no problem. And that happened at the end of last year, 2019. I think the point is that the act was passed. The state now has agreed to be the partner. It's a 50-50 cost between the state of New Jersey and the Army Corps. And that initial meeting begins in January to look at all those, narrow down to what alternative could work. And it could very well be a response that mirrors what they've said previously, which is that they're supportive of a more permanent solution, which would be some way of enlarging the reservoir through the dredging, or building a higher structure there, or a different dam structure, maybe at Campbell's Mill Pond, for example. That's the only way that Millburn can benefit. Maplewood has some benefit to it. Springfield Union and Cranford's benefit is that Cranford can't do a whole lot more in flood mitigation unless the river elevation is lowered. It's a regulatory requirement, because the problem is if we do something, it backs up into Springfield. So by having storage upstream, that helps then with that regulation, that allows then Cranford to do channelization. So there's we're married together here and have been. Sandy Hamoff, former mayor, she came down to Cranford one night and after Irene, and we kind of just talked about, she felt so alone because Essex wasn't helping her in dealing with the problem. And the problem is for Millburn is what comes downstream that has to some way be either out of the town earlier or stored. And that helps everybody else downstream. So as I pointed out, they did look at all these different alternatives. I don't know, these numbers you're pointing out, I don't recall them being that high. And again, it doesn't matter what the cost is to the federal government in some respects. It's got to have a cost benefit to them. Yeah. Their benefits have to exceed the cost of a project by 1 times. But the budgetary, I think it's 1.4 times. The only one that did that was the one that all the mayors, all the towns supported, which was 4A, which we modified to be a bypass. And that's the concern of the Army Corps was on using forecasts to allow water to be released early. The dam that they initially supported didn't have a 1 times a BCR ratio. So they're going to have to go back seriously and go back into this to see which one can work environmentally, work hydraulically, and work with the consensus of the communities. And, Millburn's going to have a big decision on its hand of what it can support. That's going to be a tough one. If it wants a larger flood control, it's going to have to support some kind of storage up in the Orange Reservoir or South Mountain, or getting that water out of there before the peak of the storm comes. These are stark choices maybe, and it's probably the reason everybody says the Army Corps is slow, but it's also, it's a challenging decision to make. and I know that, my experience, and Jason, I think all of us have been involved in these floods, and what happens with citizens, the impacts they have on their homes and lives. We didn't have any deaths in Cranford. Maplewood did, but we could have. I mean, that viral video, that was close, I guess, for that person. And so the safety is paramount. And I've been involved in this primarily because of the experiences I had with many residents, with family members, and figuring that if I stayed around long enough, something could get done. Hopefully that is where we're back at it now in a big way. It's positioned to get to the next step here. And hopefully that is something that could proceed. So I'll see what I could find.
I'm happy to share the slides, because what I do see, it actually goes through the BCR ratio. It goes through the annual benefits. It goes through like the net excess benefits. So I will definitely share that with you. I took screenshots because of course it's on a website, and again, things go disappearing. So I'm happy to share that with you. So just to clarify, so the Federal Waters Development Act, the difference between this one and 2 years previously, in the previous session, is different because it's calling on the Army Corps of Engineers. I just want to clarify to make sure I'm understanding correctly.
I'd like to answer that. It's the wording, and the wording was significant. Congressman Malinowski and I believe Senator Booker were involved in crafting the language, because the whole idea was to get it on paper as being urgent, and that it would have to be expedited. And so the ACE is locked into that. Two other things, Rachel, the references that you have, just like Dan, and I've been at this for years, I don't know what you're referring to, and I don't think that those are being examined. Those costs for millions of dollars I don't think anyone's looking at that. And the other thing that I would say is that I have, and I'm sure I'm not alone, I have a list of measures that were taken going back to 97 and coming through to IDA, and my group would be happy to share that information. We'll put it on our Facebook page and share it with your group. But Alex probably has information like that too, but we've actually listed all the measures that have been taken over the years.
Are there any town, again, I know that we're short on time, but are there any town documents or anything, like, are those the town documents that historically showed what was done?
No, I have, I have a chronology that I've put together. I'm sure Alex has documents. I'm sure Alex has, and the town engineer has documentation that she can put her hands on. I happen to save all this stuff, and hence that's why I have it. But it's there. We've done quite a bit. It's just that in the event of a 100-year flood, we cannot avoid the risk. We can do risk reduction. We can't do avoidance.
Of course, yeah. No, I remember at a town council meeting that they were like, it was brought up like what was done, and I don't think I heard follow up. So I appreciate, like, I know that you're the neighborhood historian, so we're very appreciative of that. But yeah, I would, Alex, if you could just follow up and just see what town documents there were that was done from like the engineer and whomever else.
Well, I mean, and again, we can talk offline. I don't, yeah. and I can certainly respond to some of your inquiry there. I don't want to take up any more time from our guests that have been gracious to present to us today and stuff like that. But Rachel, you and I can always touch base offline.
Okay, sounds good. I'll definitely follow up. But yeah, I definitely appreciate
the Army Corps for a link to all their past documents that go back the past decades. So hopefully that'll be available to provide to you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the explanations of everything, and I really appreciate Alex, you coordinating and being so proactive with everything, as well as Sarah. And we really appreciate all the information that you've been providing.
Yeah, yeah. And again, thank you to Sanjeev and Sarah and Richard who really kind of pulled this together. I just happen to be the guy who gets up here and talks, moderates a little bit.
I think there's a special thanks to the three guests who are in here and spend so much time with us. Truly, truly appreciate your time, and you don't even have that face that, oh my God. Again, we have been here for almost more than an hour and a half, close to 2 hours now. Thank you so much for coming for us, checking on your neighbor. And Sarah, can't thank you enough to coordinate this and work in the background. Thank you again. Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you.
If we can be of assistance in the future, if you got more questions, I'm sure Alex knows how to get a hold of us, but more than willing to help out if we can.
Great.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you all. And thank you all for
and a week ahead.
All right.
Take care.
Bye.
Take care.